I don't know if you all know, but we have a little election coming up in 2024. Oh, that's how I feel about it too. So we're gonna get into it because we gotta be better than that, right, y'all? We gotta get into it. So it has already started, T, right? So we are going to talk a little bit about what it means to be civically engaged today. I have a large panel of experts, and we're gonna move through this subject matter quickly, but we're also gonna talk about, it's not just about voting, right, y'all? It's about so much more in order to stay civically engaged. And so to my immediate left, there's a young woman who some of y'all might have heard of. Her name is Beyonce. And Beyonce said that if she needs to find out about a protest, she's calling Tamika Mallory. So to my left is Tamika Mallory. She served as the youngest executive director of the National Action Network. She became a gun violence activist after losing her child's father to gun violence, tragically. Since gone on to found Until Freedom and is doing the work of the Lord out here in these streets. Thank you, Tamika Mallory. Next, I have Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, my dear sister from Tulsa, Oklahoma, who established an organization in the name of her brother who was tragically killed by the Tulsa police and is diligently working to still get justice for those in Tulsa who survived the massacre in Tulsa more than 100 years ago now. So Tiffany, thank you for your work also at Justice for Greenwood. And y'all, I don't know if I said this, but these folks are like family to me. So clap like these are your kids in a Christmas pageant, okay? Like, what are we doing? Next, we have Brooke Foyles, who I've had the pleasure of taking some selfies with today from all the angles. Brooke is a graduating nursing student at Baltimore's, let me just make sure y'all know, Morgan State University is a historically black college and university. She knows a little something about getting votes as the student body president there. And we have Aiden Cohen-Murphy, who is a 19-year-old political organizer and a freshman at Harvard University. Crystal Mason started the Fight Against Voter Suppression Foundation and works on voter access and prison reform after facing charges herself of voter fraud. So Crystal, we thank you for your work and your courage. Alexis Anderson Reed is the CEO of State Voices, an organization that is committed to changing the future by getting folks to vote, and so much more. Thank you, Alexis. Last but certainly not least is my dear little brother, Dion Jones, who had an experience in 2020. I think 2020 was a life-changing year for all of us, but Dion had to take on the LAPD head on, and he won. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on this panel. So I want to start with you, Tamika. And the reason for that is this year you saw fit to go back to the place where you organized so much with Breonna Taylor's mother and the community to ensure that Breonna saw justice. We fell short a little bit, but there's something else you took on relative to the political process. And can you just tell us a little bit more about how you stopped Daniel Cameron in his tracks?
Telling you. Thank you. First of all,
turn the mic.
Well, there we go. Hey, everybody. Whenever I get on a stage and I'm in front of a group that looks as beautiful as you all, I say no justice, no peace. And that's exactly what we did in Kentucky. We said no justice. Daniel Cameron did not give Breonna Taylor justice. We all know what he did. It was the one moment when we were waiting, hoping, believing that especially a black attorney general would bring charges against the police officers for killing Breonna. And it wasn't me, because you know they say that we're too radical, so forget about me. The jurors came out after the grand jury was done. They came out and said they were never presented with anything for Breonna Taylor's murder. They never even had an opportunity to talk about Breonna Taylor. And there was no case presented. And they actually said that after the case was closed, the jurors got upset and started like arguing. They were waiting. They were hoping that they were there for justice for Breonna, and it didn't happen. And it was because Daniel Cameron made it very clear that he is for the police, even when they're wrong. And he decided to be an obstructionist, and therefore we decided he could not be rewarded by moving from attorney general to a higher office, which would have made him governor. And no, absolutely not. Right. I like hell no, if that's okay, Desiree. She said hell no over there. I'm repeating.
Hell no, we won't go.
Right.
I agree.
And so, you know, what we understood and what I've understood for a long time, it's been 30 years that I've been doing this work, that protest is good. We have to do that because it brings attention to issues. I believe in protest and I support younger protesters. I've seen many of the younger people who are out there on the streets right now at this conference, and I support that. But if you don't connect your protest to politics, we miss the point, right? So we have to move the needle from the streets into the House of Representatives and all those who are responsible for our lives and for the people of Kentucky. And we knew that Daniel Cameron had national implications. If he would have become, as a black man, a younger black man who's very close to Mitch McConnell, if he would have become governor, he would have had a track straight to the White House, right? They would have started to try to look at him as a presidential candidate. And what we don't need a black face, we need people who have black policies. And he instead wanted to do a number of things, and we don't have time to talk about them today because it don't matter because he won't be doing them. But he had a number of things in mind, like getting rid of the Civilian Complaint Review Board so your grandmama and my mama and others would have nowhere to go for any type of justice in the system. He wanted to do so much to give police more power and to take power away from the people. And one only other thing I'll say is that, you know, one of his policies was that he wanted to give the death penalty to people who kill police officers. And I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's just say we agree with that. And he said also he wanted murder charges for drug dealers. I said, okay, there's some people I know, they agree with that too. I don't, but they do. But he wasn't talking about giving those charges to Big Pharma, which is killing our people every day. And so there was inequity in that, and we stopped him. But what's more important than who we stopped is how we helped other people get elected to office. So we've got city council, we have other representatives, at least 5 different individuals who won their seats as a result of the movement that began in 2020 with the local community. And now in this election and a few of the earlier elections, folks have taken position. Folks who came from protesting on the ground are now in political office in Kentucky. And that's the type of movement I think we have to be building around the country.
I love that, Tamika. Absolutely. Dr. Crutcher, I'm going to come to you, and part of the reason for that is you saw a grave injustice when you lost your twin brother. And instead of being paralyzed by the grief, you jumped into moving our folks, and you've done it in multiple ways, right? Like from something like an injustice from 100 years ago to right now ensuring that our votes aren't suppressed. Can you talk about that connective tissue and why that engagement matters to you so much?
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Angela, and definitely an honor to be on this panel, and thank you to Rock Nation, Desiree, and see all of my people. Appreciate the opportunity. You know, I was in healthcare. I was treating patients, had my own clinical practice in Montgomery, Alabama, and I was doing the thing. I was working to close the disparity gaps as it related to healthcare. And then my twin was tragically murdered, my twin, in the wound for 9 months, 3 minutes apart. And I got that call, and my life changed drastically. Fast forward, the police officer, Betty Shelby, was indicted. We went to a criminal trial. First time in the history of Tulsa, a police officer was indicted. We thought we were, you know, making progress, and she was acquitted after 9 hours of deliberation. I'm gonna be honest, I did wanna just lay down and die. You know, my mom, we lost her to COVID in 2021, and after the verdict, to hear her say she killed my baby, screaming, collapsing, because we thought we were gonna get justice. The jury penned a letter to the verdict saying, we don't believe that she's blameless, but because of the way the laws are written, we have to render this verdict. And I think that was the fire that started in my belly. It started burning really, really strong. I gotta change these laws. Like you said, Tamika, it's one thing to protest, but if it's not connected to policy, then it's just a parade. And so I got with the Legal Defense Fund. I got with the Human Rights Watch. I got with National Action Network. I got with Rock Nation. I got with all of these organizations who could help me put a spotlight on the injustices that's been happening, not just current day, but that's been happening for generations. And so we started the Terrence Crutcher Foundation in my brother's name, and never in a million years would I have thought that Terrence's last words to me would be walked out the way it's walked out now. His last words were, sis, I'm getting ready to go back to school. I'm gonna make you proud, and God is gonna get the glory out of my life. Didn't know what that meant. But right now, this very moment is living proof of that prophetic word that he spoke right before he died on our birthday. And so we started this foundation with just 3 simple pillars: advancing policy, to prevent the legal murder of unarmed Black women and men in this country, to strengthen communities, because we know we have to catch our kids early. So we're disrupting school-to-prison pipeline through literacy programs. We're teaching our high schoolers organizing right now, because we know that they're the next generations of leaders. And right there in the center of our work, Angela, is honoring the legacy of our ancestors. And so when you talk about Black Wall Street, when you talk about the massacre, my great-grandmother barely escaped. And so we're on the forefront of getting reparations for the 2 last known living survivors who are 109 right now, fighting. And so the work that we do is simple. We have to act. That's what this is all about. We have to ACT. Y'all know I love acronyms. Last year was about MAD, get mad, make a decision. This year it's about ACT. Action changes things. And what we're doing is knocking doors, not just when election cycles come around, not just when we want something from individuals, but we knock doors at the Terrence Crutcher Foundation every single month to simply listen. To listen and ask people, how do you feel? What do you think? What do you want to see for your community? And the things they want to see may not be the next governor or the next mayor. Sometimes it's just as simple as street lights, speed bumps. They want their parks open. That's what we do every single month, and it's really catalyzed a movement to get people to act. And if they see their issues that they care about on the ballot, then they may get up and go to the polls and vote. So I'll yield so we can share the panel with everybody else, but thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, Tiffany. I'm gonna skip the order a little bit. Dion, I wanna come to you because at the tragic death, the murder of another Black man at the hands of police, George Floyd, you risked your own life in the middle of a pandemic, out in the streets protesting. And I think the thing that you probably thought least is that you would have your own encounter with the Los Angeles Police Department. And so I want you to speak to that a little bit and then how you were victorious.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So in 2020, as Angela said, out protesting, and while out protesting, if anybody know LA, over by the Grove, Trader Joe's parking lot, I ended up getting shot in the face by the police with a rubber bullet, breaking the entire side of my face. And the doctor said that where the bullet actually hit me, it was 1 inch from my eye and 1 inch from my temple. So had it went one way, had I not moved my head in the second that I saw it, the officer aimed at me. Had I moved one way, I would have been blinded. Had I moved another way, I would have been dead. Shortly after, Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher reached out to me asking if I wanted to pursue litigation. If anybody has ever went through litigation, you know that is a very difficult decision to make because your life goes under a microscope. I told them no for about a month, and then the police showed up at my door, and I said, hold on, let me call my lawyer. So at that time, they began to represent me, and we went through 3 years of discovery, depositions, all that stuff. Tamika, Angela, Tata, folks just have been super supportive of me during that time out in LA. And this year, in federal court, we ended up getting a judgment against the police officer who shot me. The important thing about that, though, that I am the first protester from the 2020 protests to get a judgment against a police officer that did not take a settlement, refused to take a settlement, because I thought it was really, really important of what was going to happen after the victory. And what has happened after our victories, winning in federal court, not only against that police officer, but also achieving a historic settlement around culpability with the city of Los Angeles, is that since that across the country, because we've been in federal court, people have used Jones versus the city of LA to win judgments against police officers up to $3 million. One of the most recent ones was like $3 million. $3 million, a young man whose actually uncle was a police officer who shot him with a rubber bullet. $3 million using our case. And so we see the impact of that still making a difference. But to the point of the panel, at every moment of that case, I see how engagement in the electoral system either made a difference or made it harder. So from having a police department that was trying to cover up stuff and not having an accountable police chief, having a mayor at the time that was moving very, very slow, having a city attorney who was trying to push out cheap settlements like $15,000 and $20,000 settlements for people who lost testicles. Excuse my language, but that's the truth. And not really having people in office that was taking not only this moment seriously, but taking it serious that citizens who are out there exercising their democratic right to protest are getting injured and nearly killed by the systems that are meant to protect them.
Yeah. Thank you, Dion. Crystal, I want to come to you, and it's because Dion just raised this point about how civic engagement mattered at every phase. And so we are beat over the head even when we overperform to turn out in elections, and that's all you were trying to do. And something happened. Talk to us a little bit about your case.
Well, I did FAT time, so I did 2.5 years in FAT. I came home, went back to my same house I've been living in since 2008. I went to the same polling place. I voted in 2012. And when I went there, they told me my name was not on the ballot. So I was confused. I'm thinking maybe because I gave my mom, power of attorney of the house over the kids, then that's what it is. I had a 16-year-old tell me that I can fill out a provisional ballot. And I asked him what it was, and he said, if you're at the right location, it'll count, and if you're not, it won't. So I was like, okay, fine. Pulled out my ID, everything matched, filled out this provisional ballot, went away. Next thing you know, I was called to my supervised release officer, and I was arrested for illegally voting. Now, if you guys know, a provisional ballot is not a vote. If it's in place, if you can vote, it'll go forward. If you can't, it stops right there. Well, in 2018, I was sentenced to 5 years for illegally voting, and I'm out right now, still on the appeal bond. January will make 7 years that I'm fighting to not go back to prison and do 5 years. This really upsetted me. The first thing I said was because I'm a mother. I've already left my kids once. I got out here showing my kids, even though you hit that bump in that road, you can get back on track. I was working at Santander. I had a good job, insurance for the kids and everything. But because I was on supervised release, they violated me and put me back in prison. So in Texas, let me give it to you. I completed my time. I did my federal time. I was on something called supervised release, meaning my time was over. I had my supervised release officer testify. I had the supervisor testify in my court, in my trial, saying, hey, we never told her she couldn't vote. She never signed anything saying that she was ineligible to vote. Yet, I'm still out on the appeal bond fighting to stay free. So my story was, when this happened to me, it's like, I'm never voting again. Like, oh no, if this can take me away from my kids, because it did. I had to go back to prison for 10 more months. And I was just like, it's emotional for me because I'm still living it, so I'm just trying to keep myself together.
We understand, Crystal.
But my worst was I will never vote again. My kids are looking at me say this. Everybody's looking at me say this. I'm saying this on national news. And I was like, you know what? When I did that 10 months, because I felt like that was me and God time, because I kept saying, God, why me? Why me? He said, why not you? You're the prime example of rehabilitation. So I did it. I came back and I told my attorney, Kim T. Cole, I was like, no, that's not what I want to do. I don't want it to be where I'm telling you guys not to vote because you're looking at my story, because that's exactly what they wanted me to do, is scare the black and the brown away from the poll. So I said, no, don't let my story discourage you, but encourage you to go to the polls. Because you got to understand, the judge, the DA, the prosecutor, all of them are elected officials that did this to me. So this is the reason why I'm out in the streets knocking on doors telling people, hey, don't, just because you're a felon in Texas, you're eligible to vote again. Know your laws in your states. Know if you're eligible, because we need to get out here to these polls. And we will make a difference. So that's where I'm at right now.
Crystal, thank you. And I also, if we can, just also give Crystal a round of applause, because she's not out here just fighting her case. She's using her case as a foundation to ensure that we are brave enough to go cast our own ballot. So thank you, Crystal. Thank you. Alexis, hearing what Crystal just said, and all that she's going through and sacrificing just to be able to cast her ballot, how do you leverage stories like this to motivate other folks to go to the polls when they aren't seeing change? Sometimes not on a local level, sometimes not on a state level, and sometimes even on a federal level. How are you using, even where we are right now, to motivate our folks to vote?
Yeah, thank you, Angela. And Crystal, thank you so much for sharing your story. I just first want to say it makes me angry. And it should make us all angry. And I think about how much money and effort and time is spent and legal resources to make sure that we are not voting. And we have to ask ourselves, why is that happening? It's because we are powerful. And when we think about, Angela Ray's 2024 is next year. We are less than a year away of one of the most critical elections of our lifetime, not only because who's on the ballot, but because of our values and the issues that are on the ballot. And it is going to be about making sure that not only the people who vote continue to vote, but it's going to be making sure that we are expanding the electorate. And what I mean by that is that they are intentionally trying to target our community with false narratives, right? They're trying to intentionally target Black and brown communities and young people with threats. This year, there were over 100 bills trying to stop us from voting, okay? So what that means is the name of the game in 2024 is we have to make sure that people who usually don't vote, like our grandparents, right, that young people are voting. We have to make sure that folks in the Black and brown community are voting. We have to make sure that your neighbors are voting, that folks in your churches are voting. And I think one thing that I heard over and over again on this panel is that what we see every single election cycle is that we see a huge amount of voter turnout during the federal election. So like we might see like 60 to 80% voter turnout. But then all of a sudden in the local election, you'll see it drop, like no joke, to 9% Black voter turnout. And it's those local elections at at our local level, at our state level, that are making the decisions every single day that impact our lives. Those are the DA's races, the sheriff's races, our school board races. And so we have to make sure that not only are we voting next year in 2024, but we're doing what we need to do to make sure that we're voting every single day in our community. And I think the last thing I want to say is that we know, and it's very clear, that voting alone and elections alone will not bring us freedom and liberation. But we also know that it's an important tactic, it's an important tool in our toolbox, right, in order to organize ourselves and to make sure that our voices are heard on the issues that impact our lives every single day.
Yes, thank you so much, Alexis. Aiden, I want to come to you because Alexis just raised this point about voting in and of itself isn't sufficient. It's vote and. And so you, even as a young political organizer, are engaged in some of this work. Talk about what else As this audience gets prepared to leave today, what must we be doing to not just get ready for 2024, but to ensure that we stay engaged and are protected, our interests are protected. We're mobilizing people based on our interests and holding them accountable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I first just want to say I am so honored to be here alongside all of you. You've been inspirations of mine for years. So I think if you're a young person, if you're a supporter of criminal justice reform, climate justice, Palestinian liberation, whatever the issue is, you're not satisfied with where we are politically. And you're probably not super excited to vote in the general election for president in 2024. And I think that the way that we really try to combat that is by reframing trying to push back on some of this like party narrative of this election is and will be the most important election of your lifetime. So you should come out and vote. This is what's going to decide, because people come out and vote, and they vote, and they vote, and things overall stay the same. And if you're not frustrated with that, then I don't know how. So I think that a big part of that is where like you find traditional messaging around and this focus on the presidential. But I think as people on this panel have talked about, is like the most impactful elections are on a state level, they're on a local level, and these are often elections that like there is not a lot of investment in from progressives or liberals, but there is a lot of investment in this from conservatives and people who are trying to perpetuate systems of oppression. And there just hasn't been the focus on these elections that there needs to be. And so I think that so it's one about expanding your view of voting to not just be the question of like, are you going to vote for Joe Biden next year? Like, that's a question that you can answer for yourself. But are you going to go out and cast a vote for who is going to have prosecutorial discretion in your community? Who is going to be in charge of making the policies for local schools? And I think that tying all of these issues together beyond just like voting for the sake of like, so the person who you like more than the other will win. It's about understanding that like all of these systems of oppression are existing to perpetuate each other. Education policy, if you're focused on your school board, education policy is, because of a million reasons, including the school to prison pipeline, like education policy is criminal justice policy. It is like all of these things are inherently tied together. And so no race can go ignored on the ballot. And then expanding beyond this view of voting that parties tend to push because like the parties exist to win elections, not necessarily to make change. Wow. And so when you have this system, you have to go out and not just be willing to push your party, be willing to disrupt your party, be willing to look outside politics for making change, and viewing voting as like, again, the civic engagement toolkit is an idea that I absolutely love, because it's not about like you go into the voting booth, you vote, great. What do you do when you leave? What do you do to continue trying to make the world look in a way that you want it to?
But Aiden, right there, what do you do? That's the very question I have for you. So beyond voting, what do you do when you leave? I think
there are a number of things. I think protesting is a major piece, and actually, like with putting direct demands on your politicians, like when a lot of young people are marching recently on, we'll say, like climate justice, like it's not just a question of like screaming into the void like we want climate change to not happen anymore. It's saying like President Biden declare a climate emergency, stop approving new fossil fuel pipelines. Like there are direct things that we can put pressure on politicians to do. So I think there's that piece in the political field, and then there are ways of like work with individuals in your community to kind of build systems of support, mutual aid networks that go beyond just like just what the government is going to be able to do. So there are a lot of ways. Those are just some. But anyway,
Perfect.
very honored to be here.
Thank you, Aiden. Absolutely. Brooke, Madam President, you are the only elected on this stage. And so I want to come to you a little bit about, of course, something happened on Morgan State's campus, and I do want you to talk about that. I also want you to leave your elected hat on and tell us what works to apply pressure to you and on you to create change on your campus, because those are the same examples that we can use to apply pressure to folks that we elect.
Thank you so much, and thank you for everyone who's on the panel as well as being here. There was a tragic incident that did occur on Morgan State University's campus where there were some young individuals who did, harm other students as well. But, as being someone who comes from a community, the Black community, where we have a lot of different things such as violence, a lot of institutional problems and things like that, that event shined light on something that was way deeper and something that was way more, and just a lot more problems in Baltimore City as well. And just even with our school and our infrastructure, how we look at things, right? So we're talking about voting, we're talking about getting that action. It shouldn't be, as many people are saying, we shouldn't be reactive, we should be proactive all the time. We should be advocating, we should be leading, we should be moving forward, and we should really get the understanding of the weight, for example, what the elections will carry, because we can't say everything after the elections are done. We can't do as much, but we can do a lot beforehand. We can advocate, we can get some people out of office, we can check our rules like everyone's saying, and especially for my campus, we had a big conversation about security. Why was there not more security? Why were the cameras not the way that they should have been? And that's a really big thing for us to look at, because when you don't have certain things in hand, when you don't have the resources available, when you don't invest, when you make it a passive instead of an immediate, that's when a lot of those problems start to pile up, and that's where you see the long-term effects. That's where you see the trauma, the hurt, the pain, the continuation. And I think especially for, myself as a president of my university, of a large student body, that's something I had to look at, right? I had to look at how can I not only heal the university, but how can I heal universities beyond? And that became a really daunting task, because gun violence is very, very prevalent. And, a lot of the students in my generation have been very vocal about it, even being at the height of a lot of school shootings. It's very scary not knowing if your next text, like I texted my parents that night, I didn't know if that was gonna be my last text to them. So it's things like that that really just go on and go on. And I think a lot of times it was a rhetoric about how Morgan State University was and how it is and the crime around the area. And the truth is that Morgan State University is full of students who are just as deserving as any other student. All students deserve to be safe. They deserve an environment to learn. All people deserve an environment that nurtures their needs, that uplifts them, that allows them to grow, because we all deserve to thrive and live out our destiny. Nobody should have it taken away from them early. And then that really just allowed me to even think more, because even the young men who did come and attack our campus, they're misled, they're misguided. And that's a conversation a lot of people didn't want to have. And it's always the conversation about, well, they did this, well, they did that. Where were their representatives? Where were their leaders? Where were the people who were supposed to guide them? A lot of students are lost, and a lot of children are lost because they're in a darkness. And nobody's there to be their North Star. And a lot of people don't want to be the one that leads them out, that brings them back to the light, because it's a hard, daunting task. Well, it's sad to say, but when the civil rights leaders were getting hosed down, that was a hard, daunting task, but they did it. And now we're here today. So it really has to become a thing of, what are you willing to take on to really do more for your community? Is that the sleepless hours? Is that the protests? Is that going out? Is that saying the uncomfortable things on the floors to your elected officials and letting them know what they're doing is not representing them? It's not representing the populace. It's only representing them and the money in their pockets. You know, so you just have to keep going. You have to keep really just putting into it, and especially for the students, you know, if there's students still in here, you have to understand that you may be young as well, but you can also take on that daunting task, no matter how small, of just educating your friends, going out there, learning about different things, because while you may not be able to tackle the world, for example, with that situation, we were able to tackle the safety and security at Morgan State University.
Thank you so much, Brooke. And not off the hook that easy. I still want to know what works to apply pressure to you as the president of the school. What has been the most effective strategy you've seen? Because that's going to be your call to action to these folks today.
Yes, so the most effective way that I've found to apply pressure to myself is to really look and talk to the students. So that's been able to be my way of connecting, keeping myself grounded. The way to really, really make that change and apply that pressure is to map it out. Rome was not built in a day, and we cannot fix the United States or a lot of our problems in one day. So I think especially with applying the pressure, I always remember myself that whatever I do will be able to lead the next generation, will be able to impact them. And when you remember and keep that mindset, then when you go out in order to talk about voter rights, or when you go out to talk about redlining, when you go out to talk about any type of systemic issue, and especially when it comes to change, you can remember this small step will help someone in 2040, in 2050, and 2060 as well.
I love that. Deanna, I want to come to you because you've also found ways to apply pressure through art, through your music. What other recommendations do you have today for this audience in terms of how they can apply pressure, stay civically engaged, because it is so much more than the ballot box?
Yeah, I'll say, to your point, through my work as a performance artist, through my music and stuff, my practice really focuses on folks finding the freedom within themselves. And most of the thing that's blocking us from being our freest self is most of the time dominant society. And so how do we break down those walls of, as a black gay man who grew up in Mississippi and in the church, I had to break down a lot of walls. And what I have found, the people who, whether I'm doing a 5,000 person show or a 10,000 person show, people are coming up to me, breaking down a lot of chains in their lives, not only to change their own personal lives, but being inspired by my story, thinking what they can go out and do and change the world themselves. And so, I just am grateful that people are receiving that message. I think actionably, though, the difference between me and someone else who was out there who got shot is that I had a huge, very, very powerful firm named Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher that decided to take my case and spent millions upon millions of dollars to make sure that they won their case. And so what I have thought about since then is that the power of investing in good lawyers and the power of investing in attorneys and legal funds to really give lawyers the money to really get justice for a lot of folks. Because a lot of times the reason why we don't see justice, and it is because people just don't have the money to keep going and keep going. And Gibson Dunn spent nearly $30 million on a pro bono case that they ended up winning. So that's one. And then the second, that I've really been thinking about is, I'm looking at my sister Tamika, and this is sort of preaching to the choir, but I think it's Fannie Lou Hamer, when she gave the convention speech at the Democratic National Convention in 1964, she said, we have to, sleep with our phones off the hook just because we want to live as decent human beings in the United States of America. And I think about my sister Tamika, and she said something a couple of weeks ago that really shook me, that in her neighborhood that she grew up in, she could not stand on the sidewalk and have a regular conversation safely or feel safe doing that. Because if someone walks towards her, that could likely be a threat in the neighborhood that she grew up in. And that's light. And so I think the idea of lightening the load of Tamika Mallory and the Tamika Mallories out there by us literally trying to make this world that world that we all can live as free and decent human beings in, right? And in addition to that, protect these black women who are on the front line, who don't get the credit, who get kicked out of the meetings, who get overtalked, who get gaslit. Protect these black women. Because when my sister said that, and she's known me since I was like 20, 21 years old, it really shook me to my core that in her own neighborhood that she grew up in, she could not have a safe conversation on the street because if someone walks past her, that could likely be a threat. And that's light. That's a light day for her.
Thank you, Dion. Alexis, I want to come to you. We've heard from Aiden around demands, Brooke around listening and the conversations that have to be had. Tiffany, you referenced that as well, door knocking. Resources, right? Like you talking about resources. Everybody in here is like, I ain't got $30 million to spend on this. I hope we find another way, right? But resources, right, to achieve justice.
$50, $100.
Right? So there's some type of resource,
Yeah.
but we know that it's going to take an abundance of resources. So if
Exactly.
that is your gift, spend it, right? But we also heard you say protect black women and lightening the load of the Tamikas of the world. Alexis, what do we do? What are the folks in here do? And we're going to be quick because we got 8 minutes. I'm going to be true to time because I got a flight. Alexis, and I do want to hear from you as well, Crystal, and then I'm going to come to you, Tamika, and then Tiff, we're going to wrap up. Go ahead.
All right. I have 2 calls to action. The first one, I'm going to start off with a question. How many people here have somebody in their family, in their household, a friend who doesn't vote?
Oh, Lord.
I work on...
That is not allowed in my house.
Yep. I, have been doing this work for close to 20 years. There's still people in my family who will not vote. And what I will say is we are our best organizers. So my first call to action is organize, 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 and you have to organize your people. So start off with making a list. Maybe it's 5 people, maybe it's 10, maybe it's 20. People in your house, people in your community, your church, your friends, your school. And your job with them is to connect the election or what is happening to their lives, even if it's not going to make a difference in the short term, what this means for our future as a people, right? And so make a plan to vote with them. And when I say make a plan, it means, okay, are you registered to vote? Where do you go vote? How am I going to get you there to go vote? Do you know who's on the ballot? Do you know the issues that are on the ballot? Because issues are huge. We saw last year women's right to their bodily autonomy literally being taken away. And it's on the ballot in every single state since that decision was made on the ballot. Women have come out and communities have come out to say, no, that is not okay. And it has literally changed the game. Legalization of marijuana is going to be on the ballot. So much is going to be on the ballot. So that's one call to action. The second call to action, I'll make this quick, is dream. Dream about what can be game-changing. That dream that you think about that you think sounds crazy right now actually is not. And I want to just give a very quick example. When we all think about Black Lives Matter, right? It started out in 2012. It's a hashtag by 3 brilliant women, Alicia, Patrice, Opal, and became a movement, right? At that time, in 2012, after the brutal murdering of Trayvon Martin, and if you would have tried to imagine what that movement would have turned into and the impact that it would have on our lives and our culture and the impact that it's having on how we are shifting the way we're thinking about policing in this country. In 2012, people would have said, that is crazy. And what I will say is that those crazy dreams are the things that will be game-changing in the next decade. So my call to action is plant that seed now because our lives depend on it.
Thank you, Alexis. Crystal.
My call to action would be know your rights. Don't let being a felon define you from voting. If you're eligible, go out there and vote, you guys. My mom, she carries the voter registration cards like it's a Bible. And when you turn 18 in my house, she got them ready for you. So That's what you need to find out in your state. And if you're eligible to vote, being a felon, go vote. I voted, so I voiced. And that's my call to action.
Thank you, Crystal. Tamika.
Ooh, there's so much that has been said. And just thank you, Dion, for being a good brother always, always. I think I would give the call to action that we need to invest in organizing. You know, there are folks on this row right here that are invested in my organizing and in Until Freedom, and we couldn't do it without you all, because ultimately fighting businesses, fighting issues, fighting elected officials, and then going and asking them for the money to help you do the work, it doesn't really work like that. You don't get a meeting after you've called folks out for their issues, put it that way, I'm saying it nicely. And so all of us who are in this room, the $5, the $10, the $2, the $100, the $100,000, it matters. We take organizers for granted. We don't understand, like when we see folks out there protesting, I know there are folks in my life who, you know, they look at me and they're like, oh, you know, you do great protests, and they think I'm like a protest party planner. And in fact, I'm a strategist. And an organizer who's been able to, we have major wins. And winning in the governor's race, a lot of people called them and were like, wow, because we applied very specific tools, which one, knocking on doors on days when there was no election. So we got to know the people of Kentucky because they were like, first of all, when we got there, they were like, you from New York, get out. We don't need you here. But after a while, they were like, no, we absolutely need you. Can you live here with us and help us do this fight? And we lived there for 4 months, but we had to eat. We needed hotel rooms. We needed security. And you were talking about why I was that conversation about the dangers of watching someone walk past me. And that's what I was saying, that I could be standing having a conversation somewhere and I'm in a good convo and I see someone walk past me and I turn around. I need to stop because I don't know what that may be. That's my reality when I have folks calling my hotel saying they're gonna take my life. You know, that's what we deal with. And people overlook us like we're not important, and yet they don't really understand how things are turning. It's those people, Carmen's out here, Karis is out here. There's so many people out here who are putting their lives on the line every day for all of us to have the freedoms and the little bit of joy that we have, that our children will be safe. Invest in organizers. We don't always get it perfect. Desiree gets on me every single week, like, what are you doing? You know, get it together. I'm like, Des, tell me, Des, tell me, help me. But we need that. You always on us. Listen, we got to focus. We need people to encourage us because the work that we're doing, it's taxing. We are tired. We are worn out. We are overworked. We are overlooked, overworked, burnt out. But we believe that the path to true freedom means that each one of us has to be invested. So when we say we need $10, $5, $3, or we just need a kind word or a hot chicken meal, do it. Help people so that we can continue to do our work. I'll tell you this last thing. This woman sends a check for $50 to me every 2 weeks. Miss Jenkins, Lisa Jenkins, she sends a check every 2 weeks for $50. One time, for whatever reason, the mail or whatever, the check didn't come. My heart was broken because Miss Jenkins, that communication of that $50 check, it may not be a lot to some people, but it is a lot to us because she is saying, and this has been going on for 2 years, that every 2 weeks when she gets paid, instead of that $50 going in her bank account, she has her job sending us $50 of her money. That tells me that she believes in what we're doing. And what we do at Until Freedom, instead of just taking the $50, which if Linda Sarsour was here, she'd be like, no, we need to keep the $50. But what we do is we look at younger organizers and we give it away. We are always investing and finding ways to pull other people forward. So I just want to leave that word with you all. If you're sitting in a position of power, or if you've just got $10 and that's your power, give it. Help, support, invest, because we cannot go to the people we're fighting and ask them to fund us. That's why y'all look at folks and say, what happened to so-and-so? He was so powerful, and now all of a sudden it's like he's selling out. Well, his lights were probably off or getting ready to go off, and at some point, he had to make a decision. Do I feed my children, or do I keep being out here with people who act like they love me and they tell go, 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 but then they are not really showing that there's a commitment and an investment in the work. So please invest in your local organizers, find your tribe, and make sure you do everything that you can to pull these people who are doing real big and strong work every single day. Pull us along.
Thank you, Sam. Tiffany, Dr. Crutcher, you said earlier the importance about knocking on doors and listening. And so I want to know if you have an addition quickly because we're out of time.
Yeah, I'll be really quick and just thank you. This has been really inspiring, but I'll challenge everyone to just figure out what your why is. I think it's the why that's going to get you to the polls. And a mentor of mine once said, if your why doesn't make you cry, Tamika, it's not strong enough. And my why is simply Terrence Jr., my twin brother's son. I can't bring Terrence back, but I can fight like hell, Angela, to make sure that Terrence Jr. doesn't have his same fate. And so we have to learn how to dream and know our power and our worth. And I've learned how to dream. And we've casted a vision, a generational vision for justice and liberation. And my dream is simply that I want for Terrence Jr. to walk outside free. I want him to walk outside free. I want him to be able to go to a park and play with a toy gun and not be killed to mere rice. I want him to grow up and turn 16 and get his driver's license and not be pulled over because of a broken tail light and be gunned down for Philando Castile. I want for him to be able to sit on his sofa and eat a bowl of ice cream in his own apartment and not be gunned down by somebody who mistakenly went into the wrong house. I want to play video games with my nephew.
Come on now.
And not be shot through a window, a Tatiana Jefferson. That is the dream that I have for Terrence. I want for you all to dream and figure out what your why is, and if it's strong, it will motivate you to activate for change and get to the polls and vote. And I want to shout out Gwen Carr right here. I love you. Eric Garner. And I'll just end by saying these things. Justice for Terrence Crutcher, justice for Greenwood, free Julius Jones, and reparations now. Thank you.
Thank you all so much.